Hi kids, we're going to do the skeletal system. And as I said in Schoology, this is one of my favorite things to teach. And in order to do this properly, I have to teach it to you because you're going to be responsible for knowing biological names of bones from the common names. So I want to go through it. You're going to get your own skeleton. I'll download this eventually, but let's just go through it together. First of all, you have 206 bones in your adult body, and right now you would be considered an adult skeleton. You had more bones when you were born. No, they didn't disappear. Some bones fused together. In order for you to get out of the birth canal when you were born, there has to be certain bones that are in sections. And as you get older, they're going to fuse together. They're going to come together. And the biggest areas would be your skull. That would be in sections, your shoulder area, and your hip area. So we're going to go through these. You had about like 260 when you were born, maybe a little less. But right now you got to know it's 206 bones. And in order to have the bones fuse together, or if you break a bone, you have to have the process of ossification, bone building. And look what you're going to need. Calcium and phosphorus. Ooh, common elements. And I know you know where you get calcium from. That's your dairy product. So drink your milk, have your cheese. Phosphorus, probably not aware of where you might get your phosphorus from. Believe it or not, eggs are a great source of phosphorus. Chicken. Certain fish, like the good oily fish, mackerel, salmon, sardines, those type of fish. So I know you may not like fish, but you have to have your diet of calcium and phosphorus to have good, strong bones. Take a supplement if you, don't want to eat anything that has phosphorus. So we're going to go through about, I'd say, half the bones you're responsible for, tell you a little bit about it, and it would be a lot easier in the classroom, and I would have my skeleton Oscar out to show you, but this is the best we're going to do right now. So let's talk about the skull. The skull, okay, is your head, and you're going to know it as the cranium. And it actually has different sections. You can have your thinnest section of your cranium by your temple areas. Sometimes you will rub the side of your head to relieve maybe a headache. But this was actually in 4 parts when you were born, and the bones fused together. If you've ever heard of the soft spot of a baby, it is where the bones fuse together. You could probably feel on the top of your head where your soft spot was. Mine would be totally solid. Yours might be still able to be identified. And they always tell you when you're holding a baby, never press into the soft spot because you could go into the brain. So that is your 4 sections of your cranium. It also includes your cheekbones, okay? It also includes the top jawbone, which is immovable, and this is called the maxilla, okay? Your nasal bone, you can actually feel your nose. It's kind of rubbery in the beginning because that's cartilage, but then you could feel where your nasal bone is, and it connects into the cranium. Next, we're going to have to do the jaw. The one you're responsible for is called the mandible. And this is your mandible right here, okay? Makes you, you're able to move up and down, to chew, to speak. Some people have a problem with it dislocating. I had a friend who, she was laughing so hard that the mandible slipped underneath her cheekbones. She wound up having something called TMJ, which is temporal mandibular joint disease. The T for temporal, it's because you got the temple bone, part of the cranium here. And she had to have her jaw pulled to get it out from underneath her cheekbones. It was very, very painful. But the mandible does dislocate a lot. If you've ever yawned or tried to bite into an apple and you feel a little, let's say, pull in your cheek, you're actually having it move in and out. You don't want to do that too often because then you could develop a problem. So that is your mandible. Your collarbone. Collarbone is this bone right here. You got 2 of them, one on each side of your body. Okay, right there. And the collarbone gets its name because It's where the collar, the point of your collar would sit if you're wearing a collared shirt. But it's actually called your clavicle. Clavicle. The thinnest portion of your clavicle is directly in the center. If you press up your shoulders, you can actually pinch your center of the clavicle. Football players tend to break their clavicle of all sports because they start off every play in a huddle or the line of scrimmage, and even though they're wearing shoulder pads, they press into their clavicle. Can't really put a cast on a clavicle because, well, you'd have to wrap the whole body. So it would be your arm would be in an immobilizer so that you can have it heal properly. Problem is, once you break a bone, there's a good chance you're going to break it again. It's never as strong as it once was. Okay? Moving down the center here, okay? This is called, well, you know it as your breastbone. It separates your breast or your pectoral muscles. But this is actually called your sternum. And your sternum is very important because your rib cage, all your ribs get connected to it. There's a little bit of cartilage right before it hits the sternum, so it allows your chest to expand when you breathe. Your sternum is strong, okay? It helps to protect all your vital organs, such as your lungs and your heart, directly behind it. The last piece of the sternum, it's a little point here, it's called the xiphoid process. You're not responsible to know that, but if you know people who are certified in CPR, that's when you're going to do compressions on the chest, you cannot press on that little bone there because that can break off very easily. You can also feel it if you suck in your breath and stick out your chest. You can actually feel up on it. It should hurt, believe it or not. So far we've done the cranium, the mandible, here's your clavicle, and this is your sternum. Let's go a little bit further. Okay. We'll just leave it. We're not going to do everything on this set of notes today, but I'm not going to cover it right now. The shoulder blade. One of the hardest things to see on the skeleton when it faces you this way. The shoulder blade is your scapula, okay? And it's right here, this area here. I can't turn the paper around. Like I said, if I had the skeleton, it would be better. But the scapula comes from the Latin, and if you arch your back, you can actually put your fingers underneath your scapula, and it's like a blade. If we were doing the dissection of the sheep heart, you would use a scalpel to cut into the heart. Well, the scalpel, okay, comes from scapula, Latin, and it is sharp. They give the positioning of your arm bones and your shoulder area. Not many people break their scapula. Sometimes you could fall on your back. Maybe you were on a trampoline. But again, you would not be casted for it because how would you put a cast around your body? So again, you'd be in an immobilizer. So now we're going to start working down the arms. And then after I'm done with the arms, we're going to call it a day. Believe it or not, something like this in school would take us about a week to go through the bones. But we're going to do it the easy way now. This bone right here, the upper arm bone, okay, doesn't really have a true common name. It's just called the upper arm bone. And it's called the humerus. And you're going to start thinking, oh, funny bone, ha, ha, ha. Well, the word humerus does mean funny. And the humerus is going to form an area called the elbow. And the elbow is actually what they call the funny bone. We're going to get to that in just a second. But the humerus is a thick bone, okay? It connects into the shoulder area and gives your arm stability. But now comes the tricky part. You have two lower arm bones, okay? And they designed the skeleton so you could see the one that's in the front here in this position, and then the one that's behind it, directly behind it, okay, with its arm facing a different way. I want to first talk about the radius. The radius is your forearm. So if you were standing straight with your arms to your side and your thumb was forward, this would be your forearm. Okay, that's the radius. And directly behind it is your ulna. Doesn't really have a common name except lower back arm bone, but it is the ulna, okay? And they are the same exact size. There's flesh and blood vessels in between. Those of you who are thin, I am not, you could actually try to squeeze in between your two bones, and you should feel it. Now, both of these bones can break without any issue, but usually when you fall, you land on your ulna because you're falling this way. You don't fall that way. What are you doing, a swan dive? You fall this way. So many times when people say they break their arm, it's usually the ulna, but doesn't mean the radius can't be broken. There are different types of fractures: hairline fracture, a simple fracture, which the bone just, snapped. You have a compound fracture where either the bone broke in two or more sections, or two bones broke at once, or the worst kind, when the bone breaks and pushes through the skin. That's another problem because you can't have a cast on right away. You have to have stitches to heal the skin. And in the meantime, the bone's starting to mend. And unfortunately, sometimes by the time the stitches come out, the bone may have to be rebroken again to put into proper position. Okay? So you had your upper arm bone, which is your humerus. You have your two lower arm bones. The one that is in the front, the forearm, is called the radius. The one that's behind the radius, the lower back arm bone, that's your ulna. Then you have your wrist bones. You have a lot of wrist bones. They're called your carpals, okay? There are a lot of itty-bitty bones inside your wrist, and sometimes you can actually feel these bones in your wrist. Nerves go through your wrist, okay, your carpals, and sometimes you might have a numbing sensation in your fingers, or they might feel cold, and then there could even be pain. If you've ever heard of carpal tunnel syndrome, that's occurring because sometimes you use your hands in the wrong positions for too long. Being on a keyboard, using it with construction, you're jarring your wrists. That can cause the bones to press against the nerves. And so sometimes you might have to wear a brace on your wrist. Some people have gone for surgery. But bottom line is you gotta watch what you're doing with your hands, or else it's going to be a chronic problem with the nerves being pressed with the bones of the carpals. And finally, your fingers and your toes. Okay, fingers and toes. They're called phalanges. And a lot of times people would say, oh yeah, we have 10 fingers and 10 toes. And technically that's right. But more biologically, you would have 8 fingers and 2 thumbs. The reason for it, and it's going to be hard to see in the diagram, but I'll try to show you. Each phalange, that's a finger, has 4 bones that make it up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But the thumb doesn't. This thumb only has 3 sections. You can see it better on this one. 1, 2, 3. That's part of the wrist, this bone here. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 on this finger. But this has only got 3. So we're going to go with you have 10 fingers and 10 toes. But technically, biologically, the thumb, which is opposable, that means it can go in more directions than these fingers. This sometimes isn't considered a finger because it only has 3 bones in it. Many times when you break your thumb, you do get a cast for it. If you break a finger, they might put a splint on it. You're not going to get a cast. And one last thing, because I'll mention the phalanges on the bottom here, your toes. Your toes get broken an awful lot, your pinky toe especially. And the number one way people break their pinky toes is when you stub it on your bedpost, the leg of your bed, because let's face it, you're in bare feet, maybe you're going to the bathroom, and you just accidentally stub it and it pulls away. You're not going to get a cast for it. Some people will get a cast for their big toe because it gives balance. But nonetheless, the toes seem to get damaged a lot. And so, you had your humerus, your radius, your ulna. Here is your carpals, got a lot of them there. Phalanges, okay, phalanges. And like I said, once you break a bone, it's a good chance you're going to break it again. With your phalanges, if you've broken a finger, it's probably going to be a little crooked, but it happens. It's part of life, okay? So I'm going to stop there. I think that's enough for now because you're going to have to digest the common names for the biological, and we'll pick it up in the next lesson. We'll just do a little review on it, all right? Have a good day, guys.